Congressman, welcome back to the program. Funding the government has gone to what we've seen a million times in the past, just kicking the can down the road, passing a CR, continuing resolution, just keeping the government funded now through December the 20th. Obviously, I think we're going to have a clear idea of who the next president is going to be by then. I'm just curious, how do you think this is going to change next time you guys deal with this in the House when either Trump or Harris will be the president-elect?
Well, this is nearing my first term, end of my first term in Congress. And it's so unfortunate that the right wing Newt Gingrich influence remains here in Congress. Newt Gingrich once said he wanted to give gridlock a good name, and that's just awful. We keep on seeing the American people and government services being held hostage with these threats of a government shutdown. And Democrats said, okay, we'll be willing, even though we're in the minority party, we'll be willing to be the folks to put together a plan, put together a CR to keep the government services going, because the Republicans that are in charge of the House of Representatives couldn't figure out a way to do it. 82 of them wouldn't vote to keep government services open. And so the Democrats were the adults of the room and said, we're willing to work with whatever, Republicans that have still some reason in them, to make sure that veterans could still get their benefits, to make sure that if you're trying to change your address, so you still get your Social Security check, that can work. So we kept government services going yesterday. It was thanks to the Democrats coming together. And hopefully in these elections, we retake a Democratic majority and that those Republican voters try to push Republican representatives to just have some reason. So that way we don't have to keep on going through these CR fights and actually pass our budgets on time. And I look forward in December to passing actually full budgets for the government that can actually serve the people.
When this comes back to a head, though, December 20th, or prior to that, what's going to be different besides a president-elect, though?
What I hope is that the voters communicate very clearly this November to everyone in Congress that they want to see people work together rather than try to break the government services folks rely on. Something I've learned here in my first term in Congress is that so much of the right-wing Republican strategy is to break things and then campaign on them being broken. But an infant can break something. It takes adults and people committed to public service to build things. And what we want to build, for example, is a tax system that actually makes sure that the top 1% have to pay the same tax rate, say, as teachers and plumbers and custodians and restaurant workers. We want to make sure that Social Security is expanded and is able to be funded for generations to come. Those are the kinds of conversations we should be having in the Congress rather than the entire government being taken hostage and some small number of MAGA extremists saying, no, we'll just break the whole government if we don't get what we want. That's not what the American people want. And I hope that message gets sent this November.
One more question on the election. Do you expect any political unrest after November the 5th?
We are a country based on the peaceful transfer of power. And that needs to be a message that is clearly sent by every candidate. I'm proud to say it. I appreciate those reasonable Republicans that are willing to say it. But what we hear constantly from Donald Trump, when he's asked by members of the press, just like you, whether he's willing to accept the results of the election, he's already forecasting that he wants to do a repeat of what he did last time, which is lose an election badly, lie about it, and then essentially encourage a violent insurrection that hurt many people. And I think the voters need to make it very clear to him that America believes and deserves peaceful transfers of power, no matter who wins the election. And so we need to be prepared that if Donald Trump keeps on forecasting that he wants to incite political violence, that we deliver a landslide election against him, so that there are so many votes clearly against Donald Trump that he has no window for continuing to harm our democracy the way he's been doing.
Congressman, I want to ask you about something you just introduced called the Migration Stability Resolution. It's trying to address the root causes of immigration, which we all know the border is a huge issue for a lot of Texans. Tell us what this resolution would do, and why is it just a resolution? Why wouldn't it be a binding piece of legislation?
We are preparing binding pieces of legislation to create more stability in Latin America and in the Caribbean so that fewer people are forced to migrate. But we know right now that Republican Speaker Mike Johnson is committed to gridlock and not to passing legislation. And so we're presenting some of the ideas this week so that hopefully under a Speaker Hakeem Jeffries or under a more reasonable speaker, we finally can pass some laws that will make it so that our immigration system is more orderly, more lawful, and more stable. That's what the American people want. And what people in Texas know is that there are certainly families like mine, that come here for opportunity and contribute. There's also families that are forced out of their homes, that wanted to stay in their homes, but because of violence and because of persecution, they got pushed out. And very often the United States contributed to that violence or to that persecution because of our failed foreign policies. And so the Migration Stability Resolution is bringing to the forefront something we don't want to talk about in Washington, D.C., which is how the United States entraps Latin American countries in endless debt, how the United States sanctions policies oftentimes don't hurt authoritarian leaders in Latin American countries. They starve everyday people, and that pushes them out of their homes. And finally, how gun policy, especially in Texas, leads to more death and violence in places like Mexico. The majority of the guns the Mexican government confiscates from cartels come from the United States, the vast majority, and the majority of those come from Texas. And so we need to change our gun policies, our sanctions policies to stop promoting violence and poverty in Latin America. And that might actually provide more stability for our migration system.
But what's the strategy as a resolution? Is it to float a trial balloon, see if you can get some support behind it, and then try to do something that's binding?
Yes, the idea is let's get the word out there that people watching this probably don't know that the vast majority of the guns that are winding up in cartels' hands are because of Greg Abbott's policies that allow people to buy weapons of war, oftentimes without a background check at all. That's how these guns oftentimes are getting into the hands of criminal organizations. If that fuels violence in Latin America, then that pushes people out of their homes. If we want to actually address the immigration issue, let's address issues in Latin America. Let's stop putting fuel on the fire of poverty and instability, and let's create more legal pathways for migration. So we put the ideas out there. We're hearing and seeing much, much more support. And so then we can start bringing forward legally binding bills to say, let's change the way that guns get into Latin America. Let's change our gun policies in this country. Let's change our sanctions policies that end up starving people in places like Venezuela and Cuba. Think about it. It used to be that the vast majority of people trying to cross our border and immigrate here were from Mexico. Now, the biggest numbers come from places like Venezuela, where under President Trump, massive economic punishment policies were put on the Venezuelan people. Not on the Venezuelan leaders and authoritarians, but on the people. And we should stop punishing people in Latin American countries and doing this collective punishment policy, because it doesn't help change conditions in that country. In fact, it makes things worse.
Two last questions here for you. Some big news this week involving you, obviously. You're running for chairman of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Tell us why you want that leadership position, and if elected, which way you would take that caucus.
I'm running for that position. It's an internal election of our members. I'll respect whatever decisions it is they choose to make. But for me, I think that so many progressive policies are actually the common sense policies the vast majority of Texans support. Things like making sure that billionaires pay their fair share, that the corporate tax rate be somewhat reasonable. Right now, corporations are getting away with paying sometimes less taxes than a working class person. Sometimes they're paying no taxes at all. And then they're using that tax break money to pay lobbyists to continue to drive their own taxes down. That's just not right. The everyday Texan can't afford a paid lobbyist. They pay their taxes. And so when folks ask about why is it that prescription drug costs keep going up? Why is it that they can't afford childcare or retirement? Or why is Social Security potentially at risk of not having solvency? It's because these billionaires and big corporations manage to escape paying their taxes. So I think that's a way that the Congressional Progressive Caucus could be focused not just on something people consider a progressive issue, but something that Democrats, independents, and Republicans alike in places like Texas could support. I also think that some of the key core progressive issues of taking on corporate price gouging are also so important. For example, when you see the price tag going up at the grocery store, that is oftentimes driven by big corporate monopolies. When I was born, there were dozens of companies that sold and controlled the meat market, for example, in the United States. Now it is 4 companies that have consolidated and basically own and run all of the meat from top to bottom in this country, and they've been driving prices up. Same thing in the housing market. So let's take down those high prices and make sure that there is a fair tax system by actually confronting corporate power in this country.
Congressman, last question for you. Senator Bernie Sanders from Vermont is going to join you to campaign there in the 35th district. Obviously, you're running for re-election, but what should we read into that? Anytime a big name comes, it either tells me you need support or you want to rally your people to the polls. What should I read into this?
We asked Senator Sanders if he'd be interested in coming to Texas, not for my own reelection. That won't be the focus of any of the rallies, not for his election, because he's elected handily always in Vermont. The reason we're rallying is because people like Attorney General Ken Paxton are doing everything they can to suppress the vote. And our goal is going to be go and tell young people and working people to get registered to vote. The voter registration deadline is coming up at the end of next week. And so we are going to be going from city to city, telling people to come out, hear some speeches, hear some bands, and get registered to vote. Make sure your voter registration is updated. No matter how you want to vote, you have a right to vote. You can vote for me, you can vote for somebody else. What's most important is that you get registered to vote and you make your voice heard. I don't know why Ken Paxton is so scared of everyday Texans voting. And so we're going to make sure that they hear the message, the American message, which is get registered to vote. We want to help you be registered, and your vote is your choice.
Congressman, thank you for the time. We appreciate it, sir.
Thank you. Take care.